Tina was supposed to go to Las Vegas. Maybe I should have mentioned this. From the 14th to the 16th for a climate reality training, which is led by Al Gore. I did my first training back in 2012, and I've been to 7 other trainings. But hopefully you'll still be able to attend a training.
They postponed it because of the coronavirus.
Yeah, the coronavirus. So my story is that I'm originally from St. Louis, and then for about 25 years, I worked at this place right here. Anybody been to this place or know what this is? Crater Lake, yeah, it's a good 5-hour drive from Portland. But I worked there for about 25 years. This is a picture of me taken back in 1992. About 28 years ago here. I haven't changed a bit, have I?
Same thing.
Yeah, this sweater is still holding up good. I haven't washed it. But this is, actually I feel like I've gotten better looking over the years. So this is actually me in my uniform as a park ranger. So for me, I was sent here tonight to talk about our ecological well-being, is what Tina took us on the
That's part of our mission, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, one of the best parts of working in the national park is that just that connection with nature. So I was talking about it 5 days a week. I was an interpretive ranger, right? I narrated the boat tour, did trolley tours, and an evening campfire program, which by the way was on climate change. So this is great to have a climate change theme here tonight. I did a historical lodge talk. But one of the best parts of being a park ranger, on my weekends, I was living it. I was still hiking up to these different points here. And there's just nothing about it. So for me, there's just nothing to have that connection with nature. And to this day, my wife and I, we're always out hiking. We live fairly close to Columbia River Gorge. And it's just so connected. One of my favorite all-time quotes is from Anne Frank, that I can share with you here tonight, is the best remedy for those who are lonely or afraid or unhappy is to go outside. To be somewhere we can be quiet with the nature's heaven and God, because only then does life feel as it should be, along the simple beauty of nature. So just being grounded in that just has made a huge difference in my life. So Crater Lake itself is very unique. Anybody know how deep the lake is? Well, not quite a mile. It'll be like 5,000 feet. But it's like 2,000 feet deep. Anybody know how it gets its water? It's all snow and rain. It's basically its own watershed. And we get a tremendous amount of snow there. Anybody know how much snow we get? A total accumulation of 44 feet, about 520 inches when you add it all up for the year. But as it accumulates, it's almost enough to bury our 4-story lodge, which is amazing. So an amazing amount of snow. But the scary thing is, with climate change, we've been noticing our snowpack has been going down over the years, since about the 1940s. And I noticed it with my own eyes. 2012, this is a good year, with about 8 to 10 feet of snow around May 25th. I typically would see it snow up towards Father's Day. But these more recent years, I've been seeing less and less snow. 2015 was our lowest snowpack on record, and we've had some really dismal years in this last decade. We only had less than 200 inches of snow. We don't normally get over 500 inches of snow. And at that level of snow, it didn't get below 6,000 feet. When you don't get that much snow in the winter, what do you think it does to the fire season? Well, that summer we had record forest fires in the park. We had 20,000 acres that burned that summer. And this is actually a video that a park visitor took. And you'll see how fires create its own weather. It creates its own cloud up there. So we know this with climate change. That as it gets warmer out west, the number of large fires have been increasing. And I've seen this myself with increased smoke. And you guys have noticed this too this last few summers. Last summer was pretty good, but particularly the summers of 2015 and 2017 were awful. So my wife and I share a car. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint, not having excess automobiles. And by the way, I love using the public transportation here in Portland, so I try to minimize my carbon footprint. So what happens is I drove up to Portland for the weekend, and then I flew back to Klamath Falls in a commercial flight. And I was so excited because I was going to finally able to fly over Crater Lake and see it from the air. Well, it was so smoky that summer, but this is what I saw. I could hardly see the lake from all that smoke. And so what we know too is that as the temperatures are getting warmer, our natural disasters are increasing. The size, the scope, and the expense of our natural disasters, as far as the hurricanes, floods, fires, etc. We also know that climate change is a huge concern for the Department of Defense. In 2014, we're now going on 6 years ago, they did a quiet project, quadrennial, oh, that's a hard word to say. Yeah, where they try to, like every few years, assess what's the biggest threats to the military, and you talk to the generals and admirals, they're going to tell you now it is climate change, because they're worried they call it a threat multiplier. We're likely to lead to more food and water shortages, pandemic diseases, and refugees across the globe. Farmers are concerned, and agricultural experts, because as the temperatures get warmer, it's harder to grow crops, they're more sensitive to heat, and also the food is not as nutritious, too. Doctors are concerned about it being a climate emergency. This was in the Lancet 2015, one of the leading medical journals. And what they're particularly worried about is disease outbreak. This is even before coronavirus. We have these tropical diseases that are being spread, partially because we get on flights, but also because of warming temperatures. These diseases that were more confined to the tropics are now expanding northward and southward. A few years ago, this was the concern, was the Zika virus. So now they understand that the concern is on the coronavirus. Remember a couple of years ago in South Florida and in Central and South America, they were actually telling women not to get pregnant because of the impact from the Zika virus. We're also worried because of sea level rise and deforestation that's also contributing to climate change and warming temperatures. And that we could lose all 50% of our land-based species in this century. So there's so many things going on with climate change that you can talk about. That is a huge concern here. It's kind of multiplying onto itself. The cost keeps going up and up. And scientists are now telling us, too, that we really have until about 2030 to really cut our emissions in half. What they really want us to do is just try to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. We're approaching a degree of Celsius. This is the global temperature right now. But we're really worried that if we don't cut our emissions in half, we make it much harder to really prevent future warming or possibly even catastrophic or runaway climate change. This is a quote that I think about a lot here. Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about the civil rights movement, but this could be easy to talk about with climate change now. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. Our decisions that we're making here today does impact it. That we're forced with now the fierce urgency of now. I thought that was here right here, that the mayor's office was here in a discussion with us about climate change and a climate emergency. So the hottest years on record. This was from a year ago. And so the hottest 18 and 19 of the hottest years, this is really measured since 1880, have occurred in the last 5 years, but this is from a year ago. So where is 2019? Well, the hottest years on record is 2019 came right below 2016. And even scary for me is that this past January was the warmest January on record of any January in the last 140 years. Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I hear all this, I'm about ready to scream. Literally scream. So are you guys ready for some good news? I know I sure am. So again, it's about our ecological well-being. Well, for me, I've been kind of involved working on this issue now for 10 years, of giving presentations and trying to organize on it. And one of the quotes that I kind of hang my hat on, and it keeps me going every single day on this heavy topic, is what Joan Baez said decades ago, that she said that action is the antidote for despair. So I'm going to go through a few things that I'm doing to help take action on this subject. Number one is, and I've been sharing this for a year now, is you got to vote in every single election. Nathaniel Stinnett, he runs an amazing group called the Environmental Voter Project, and I heard him speak on a Citizens Climate Lobby conference call in June of 2019. Actually, it was in June of 2018, but it's about a year and a half ago, and I'll tell you more about Citizens Climate Lobby here in a moment. So what they do is they're all about identifying environmental, kind of climate-centric voters and getting them to the polls. And so, likely voters, looking back at the 2016 election, because we get into the presidential election coming up here, likely voters in that last election did not prioritize environmental issues. When they asked voters, what are you voting on? These are the top issues. Of course, national security and terrorism is scary for a lot of folks, the economy and jobs. immigration, healthcare, but look where climate change fell, almost to the very bottom, only 4% of voters. This was in the last election. Hopefully it's going to be a lot higher in this election, but that's where we were in the last election. So what happens is that if you're a candidate running for office, you're going to be polling. What issues should I prioritize? Who are you going to poll? You're going to poll likely voters, the people who are going to go to the polls. And who are the likely voters? The voters that show up in basically every election. They try to poll those voters. They don't poll non-voters. They're going to go with who's actually voting as far as what to prioritize. So I didn't even know this until a few years ago, that when you vote, it's actually public record. Not how you vote or who you voted for, but when you vote, it's actually public record. And so for years, it was bad news for the environment because it was a very low priority overall for voters. And when we don't vote, politicians are not going to act on climate. So what happened is that in 2016, the Environmental Board Project identified there's 200 million registered voters in the United States. And what's sad, starting out with, is only 136 million of them turned out. 64 million stayed home in an election that had really huge consequences. So of those 136 million or 200 million, you have 20 million that they identified using analytics of the voters that where the climate and the environment is their highest priority. Guess how many of those voters showed up on election day? It was only about 10 million. About half of those voters showed up. 10 million out of 20 million. And the election was decided by 77,000 votes in 3 states. So as a voting group, we've got to do better as voters to have a better environment and a better climate. So what they do is they try to do what they can to push voters to the polls, the Environmental Board Project. Push them to the electorate. So they do this by 3 ways, is that they identify those voters, they have complicated analytics and modeling to identify those voters, and then they contact them. They knock on their doors and call them, and they even ask them, they said, do you vote? And everyone lies their pants off. They say, oh yeah, I vote all the time. And they say, whoa, well we've noticed here that you actually haven't voted in a while. You know, they use peer pressure and encourage to try to get people to vote to the polls and voting. Try to form habit reinforcement to get them to vote. So these are actions you can do right now. It's because voting is so high, so important coming up here. Is pledge to vote. Pledge to vote every election. Volunteer to canvass, make calls, and make texts to get your friends and family and get voter turnout out there. And also be a loud and proud environmental voter. And I think there is some proof that it has worked in Oregon overall. Is that Oregon is a success story in our last election. Is that we top the voter turnout because we make it easy to vote in Oregon. We register everyone through when they register to drive, and we give a chance. We make it much easier than many states here. So what happened was that as a climate organizer myself, I was told, well, if we wanted to have climate policies, we got to canvass. And I particularly lobbied, or particularly organized with Renew Oregon on the state level. And so I knocked on doors, I put flyers on doors, and we really cranked up that turnout, and we were able to get super majorities, 60% majorities in the House and the Senate here in the Oregon legislature. So I'm organizing on the state level with Renew Oregon. I'm involved in many different groups here. So we're trying to get what's called the Clean Energy Jobs Bill passed. How many folks are familiar with our state bill here, the Clean Energy Jobs? Of our cap and invest bill, of taxing the biggest polluters, put a cap on the biggest polluters in the state, because the 100 biggest polluters create about 84% of the carbon pollution, and then invest in frontline communities and rural communities and in farmers here. Invest in fire prevention, more transportation, weatherization for low income, and then invest in trying to reduce our emissions here in Oregon. So what happened is that there was a lot of hearings, and this bill actually passed the House. I was there when it passed. It was a 6-hour floor debate and vote, and then what happened is that the Senate walked out. Oregon has a weird rule where 4 states.
Only the Republicans.
Yeah, only Republicans. Good point there. Oregon's one of 4 states. We have a 2/3 quorum. We have a 60% majority in the legislature of Democrats that want to do something on climate change, but a 2/3 quorum. So the Republicans took advantage of that and walked out and basically ended up killing the bill. But we had the votes for that in the last session, it was just prevented. So it shows that voting does work in a sense that we did our job of voting, it's just the silly arcane rule prevented that here. So we almost got it done. This was the beginning of last year, we were ready for 2019. We almost got it done, and now we're still fighting to get it done in 2020 because unfortunately there's another walkout that's happening right now. So you can actually help me with this here. I'm going to Salem this week to meet with the meet with anybody I can see that's in the House and Senate, to fill out these postcards, and just we're trying to encourage them to stay strong, stay in session, for this week, to try to get this bill passed, somehow try to get the Republicans there. So I got these cards for you to fill out if you want to fill these out here, and I'll make a copy for your representative here too. So voting is so important. The next step is regularly contacting your member of Congress. So on the federal level, I'm involved with Citizens Climate Lobby, and twice a year I've gone to Washington, D.C., to lobby congressional offices here. Who do you think I enjoy lobbying more, the Democratic offices or the Republican offices? Well, believe it or not, the Republican offices. What do you say? Well, what's interesting is when you meet with the congressional staff behind closed doors, they tell you something very different than what's said publicly. Behind closed doors, they tell you they get it, they know climate change is real, they know they need to do something about it. What they've told me is that they're not hearing from their constituents about it. So up until 3 years ago, I lived in St. Louis. My wife and I lived in St. Louis. So they would say, call us, write us. We need to hear this because in my old district in St. Louis, Trump had won that district, she had won the district, so she's not going to stick her neck out unless she knows the voters are behind her. So I'd go back home, and I'd tell my friends, you got to contact her. And they would say, well, I don't like her. And I'd say, well, I'm not asking you to date her. I'm asking you to do your job as a constituent and contact her. So then I created this meme. I put this meme on social media for those of you who don't like it. I'm still active on social media here. I put that when I lived in Missouri, people would tell me I don't contact a member of Congress because she won't listen to me. Well, then I moved to Oregon, and people told me, well, I don't need to contact Earl Blumenauer or Susan Bounty. She already agrees with me. And then I say, oh, I don't care if they agree with you or don't agree with you. Contact them anyway, because that's the only way to make real change on issues that we care about, such as climate change, immigration, ending shutdown. So it's so important that we're regularly contacting our members of Congress and state legislators and local officials here. So a year ago, I read this book, Mary DeMacher. And she has a really wonderful book called A Parent's Guide to a Climate Revolution, of just how to engage your children on this issue and be an example for them. And I love what she said in the beginning. She said of the book, if our choices between scrubbing out our peanut butter jars, recycling, or calling your senator about a key climate change position, it's more effective and more important to throw away that peanut butter jar and call your members of Congress. System change over climate change. Now, when I started using the slide, people were just like, they were angry. What do you mean, throwing away your peanut butter jar? So I've had to make an adjustment in my program here. So what I do is, if you spend time with me, I am a very dedicated recycler here. So what I did is I took my picture of myself because it was an empty jar, scrubbing it out to recycle, and I called my member of Congress at the same time, or the same day. So you can chew gum and walk to do this. You can recycle, and you can contact your legislators here. So number 3 is, when you do contact them, have a specific ask. Because they're going to want to know, well, what bill are you for? What bill are you against? So on the federal level, what we want to do is, I think the big thing we want to do is put a price on carbon. And we're going to put a price on carbon, we're going to put a price on denial in politics here. So what economists will tell you across the political spectrum, the most conservative economists, the most liberal, is we've got to put a price on carbon. That we've got to tax what we burn, not what we earn. What's really interesting here in the United States is, I saw this graph in National Geographic. In the early 1960s, nearly half of the U.S. population smoked. Just think about that for a minute. If we were in this room about 40 years ago, there'd probably be a number of us here smoking in this room, which would be unconscionable here today. So cigarette smoking has gone down from 50% down to less than 20%. Now the social norms have changed, we know a lot more about the health impacts, but economists will also tell you because cigarettes is a lot more expensive to smoke because the taxes are on it. So worldwide, carbon taxes are coming more into vogue. There's actually 46 countries that are covered have a carbon tax on including all of Canada. China's in the process of implementing one, but Mexico has one to the south of us here. There's 58 total that are scheduled, are scheduled, and 31 subnational. 20% of global emissions now are now covered under a carbon price. Now it's too low, it needs to be cranked up here, but it's happening more globally. So for the United States, we need to ask ourselves, do we want to be laggards on this issue or leaders on this issue here too? What I found, I learned this weekend that of our trading partners, of goods that are imported in the United States, about 80% of our goods now have a carbon price on it. So it's happening more and more globally here. So on the federal level, because I wore more than one hat, I'm involved with a group called Citizens Climate Lobby. And Citizens Climate Lobby now have 574 active chapters worldwide and over 470 here in the U.S. And over 182,000 volunteers. We do have an active chapter here in Portland if you did want to get involved. So we have a singular goal. We just have one goal of Citizens Climate Lobby, is that we the people ask Congress to pass what's called carbon fee and dividend. And what's carbon fee and dividend? What you do is you tax the fossil fuel at the source, the coal mine, the oil well, or the U.S. border, and you take that pot of money and you give that back to Americans as a monthly dividend check. So you're more than covering the increased costs of gas, utilities, and those hidden costs that are in the products that we buy. And what's interesting, for 60% of Americans, primarily the low income and middle income, they actually would come out ahead. They get a bigger check back than their increased costs. So we love this policy because it's effective, it creates jobs, it has bipartisan support, and it's good for people. We like this because it's effective. It would reduce carbon emissions by 40% within 12 years. So the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations, they say we need to have it by half. This almost gets us there. We probably have some other policies in place, but this gets us really close. And economists, scientists like it because it's simple, comprehensive, and effective. It creates jobs. When you put money back in people's pockets, 70% of our U.S. economy is actually consumer spending. People are going to spend it. They're going to spend on health care. They're going to go out to eat. They're going to boost our economy, which is going to increase jobs. Not just wind turbines and solar install, which, by the way, are the fastest growing jobs. It's going to increase jobs in health care and other services here also. So a big boost to our economy. It's good for people. 114,000 U.S. deaths occur each year because of poor air quality. My dad right now is in hospice care in St. Louis. He has bladder cancer. He had his kidney removed 7 years ago. And the doctor removed his kidney and a huge tumor that said, "You're a smoker, aren't you?" Well, my dad never smoked. But we grew up about a couple miles away from a coal plant. Now, I can't 100% say that was a coal plant, but dirty air increases our risk of cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and other diseases here. So when we switch to clean air, to clean energy, it's improving our quality of life, and for us and for our animals, or for our families here. And also the dividend puts money back in people's pockets, just every month to spend how they see fit. Again, primarily benefiting low and income people. And it has bipartisan support. That's what we're looking for. It's really hard to pass anything in Congress with just one party. We're trying to make it bipartisan to really give this program legs to it. What's interesting is that when you talk to millennial Republicans under the age of 40, they get climate change. They get we need to do something about it. And Americans want us to do this in a bipartisan way. More than half of millennial Republican voters want action on this. And it's too urgent to be caught up in partisan politics here. So the good news about our bill is we're up to 80 co-sponsors on this here. We do have one Republican so far, Francis Rooney, but we're hoping we're going to get more after the primaries. Those that can actually will know that they're not going to have a primary challenge or can survive the primary challenge, or will be more brave in supporting us here also. But still, we have more co-sponsors than any other kind of carbon pricing or climate bill that's out there right now. And who here likes the Green New Deal? About half of our co-sponsors are also co-sponsoring the Green New Deal resolution. So they see this as a step as towards implementing the Green New Deal. So for me, I've got from the federal level here, I've got this clipboard, and I've got pens with me here also. I think I just left them there. Just sign, there's the pens here too, to fill out, because what I'll do is, I will have, if you just fill this out one, I'll make 2 copies of this. The original goes to your state, or your US rep, and then I'll make copies for your senators here also, to make sure that you know you want climate action here on tier 2. And again, it's so important that we take action. Please don't just take this home with you. I encourage you to fill it out here tonight, because I know what you're going to do. You'll take it home with you, and then you'll watch Netflix and forget all about it. But again, if you do it here tonight, then I will make copies for you, and I'll make sure that your voice is heard with the members of Congress here. So what I like to say is that, speaking of our ecological well-being, to take action on climate change, the most important person who can make the biggest impact reducing the threat of climate change is
yourself.
the person sitting in your chair. So that is my presentation here this evening. I saw that there was one question here already.
Go for it, Dave. What happened, Dave?
Are we at the question point? Yeah, so no, I think everything you're saying is wonderful.
Yeah.
Just anecdotally, so I follow Governor Kate Brown on Facebook.
Yeah.
And, pretty much every time she posts, she gets 90% negative feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see are these armies of trolls who absolutely, there's some sort of, there's this dark money, right?
Yeah.
The Koch brothers,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
the AM radio, the right-wing radio, all these right-wing fossil fuel, ultimately it's the fossil fuel companies that have billions of dollars, ExxonMobil and all, and they're somehow creating these hordes of people, conservative right-wing people, that are convinced that climate change is a hoax by Democrats so they can make more money. The scientists can make more money for funding. They think it's a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
They just absolutely think it's a hoax.
Yeah.
It's not real. And I guess what my main point is that we're losing the propaganda war. There's a propaganda war where we come to a gunfight with knives. It's
Yeah.
like our fists. We're missing something.
Mm-hmm.
And what I feel like we're missing is a counter propaganda army. We need to think of it as a propaganda war.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like people who live in Eastern Oregon, in rural Oregon, are convinced that this is a hoax to tax them.
Mm-hmm.
And they just see it as, you're not going to tax me. I have to drive 50 miles a day or 100 miles a day for work in my pickup truck, and you're just trying to tax me. You're going to hurt my livelihood. So I guess my thought is, I know that there's a lot of carrots. They see it as sticks,
Yeah.
not a carrot.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to do is propagandize the carrots and say, no, you're going to get more jobs. You're going to get more.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to help your livelihood. It's going to help you in many ways. We're not trying to, hit you with a stick. We want it. So that's my main thing is propaganda war.
I know, it's something I struggle with every day, and you're making an excellent point here, Dave. What I wish I had, I've taught 3-hour classes on this, and one thing that's good to look up is Yale Climate Communications does what's called the 6 Americas Report, the Global Warming 6 Americas Report, where they find where Americans are at on this subject, is that unfortunately the loudest voices in the room are the people that are denying the reality of climate change, but they're only about 10% of the population. But they're screaming at the top of their lungs, and it makes it for the rest of us to be heard. But there's about 33% of us now that are alarmed on this subject. But we tend to be quieter about it, we tend to be nicer about it. So
We raise our hands.
we raise our hands. Yeah, that kind of thing. We just have to figure out a way, but what's happening is that other side, more people are shifting towards, so there's the alarm, the people who are taking action, and that's now almost 30%. There's a separate, but a lot of them still don't know what to do. They're alarmed, they're like, we've got to do something. And so you have to kind of help focus those folks. Well, these are some specific tasks you can do. The next group is what's called the concern. Yeah, they're concerned about it, but they're concerned about other things too. But they are concerned about it. Then you have, and then that's about another 20%. So you're getting close to 50% of the population. Then you're getting the cautious in the middle. They're concerned, but then they're almost like cats. When they hear something else, they're concerned about that too. Then you have like another 10% which are disengaged. That tend to be low-income folks. They're just trying to make it every day. Climate change, yeah, I'm just trying to get to my job. So, but those folks, when you tell them about it, yeah, they're concerned, but they're like, you gotta help me, I need a job, you know, I need a place to live. And then you're getting in, there's another like 10% that's just doubtful, they're kind of plugged in with the dismissive. But when you go on TV, there's an alarmed person and a dismissive person, where they're missing a huge segment of the population that's kind of floating out there. So it's a matter of just organizing those people that are concerned. I know a lot of people say, in the Sunrise Movement and different movements too, once you really energize that 10% of the population, then you can really get movement on an issue here. So within that alarm, just really getting people focused. That's why I really focus on, are you contacting your member of Congress? Are you contacting your state legislature? And probably other people have other, but just giving people specific things that they can do.
I just want to say, it's great to contact the politicians, but I think we should contact the people of Eastern Oregon.
Well, I actually did do a tour of Eastern Oregon here too, and I can go into a whole
I'd like to hear about that.
presentation.
I bet you got some.
Okay, so we've got it, we're
Yeah.
going long, so let's try to wrap it up, guys. Thanks again so much for pinch hitting, Brian, this is.
Oh, thank you.
And you'll be at the thing tomorrow, right?
Yes,
So
I sure
if
am.
anyone
Yeah,
wants to finish their, whatever they're filling out, yeah, I can take them and I'll see him tomorrow, so. That works. Cool. And the next thing on our agenda is actually something that is